Time no longer. Chapter 2, Part B, Premise. The book of Revelation has existed for almost 2,000 years. Typically, man has attempted to interpret the book of Revelation as a complex puzzle. God did not intend it to be that way. Rather, in simple terms, John describes the events following the death of God's Son, Jesus. As was Jesus' custom, so is God's. Their method is that of using symbols and parables to assist them in explaining things to mankind. This puts everyone on a level playing field despite his position in life or degree of knowledge. A doctor explaining an operation he is about to perform on a patient will use drawings or symbols or even a video to help the patient understand the procedure. Doctor, how big is my gallbladder? It's about the size of a pear. Immediately the patient understands. He has eaten 100 pears and knows exactly what the doctor means. God does things in exactly this same fashion. I will repeat Peter's words. Revelation is not a private interpretation. It is there in black and white for all to see and understand. The book of Revelation is not a lengthy book. It contains some 22 chapters, about average for books of the Bible. The chapters are not long, averaging about 20 verses each. The majority of the Bible deals with life and how to live it. Revelation deals with how we have lived it and how we will live it in the future. John was a man of great faith. He communicated with God through his angels. John was a contemporary of Jesus Christ and lived nearly the entire first century A.D. John wrote this book of Revelation at about the turn of the first century. A.D. 95 is commonly accepted as the date when John wrote this inspired and monumental epistle. John had the great privilege of walking and talking with Jesus on a daily basis for several years while Jesus was on earth. His written interpretation of what he was shown by God has to reflect his personal knowledge at that time. Our interpretation must be based not just on our own knowledge, but that of John's. In part, we have to view our revelation through John's eyes. What was he seeing in the inspirational visions described in the book of Revelation? We must remember that war was fought in John's time with shield and sword. Hand-to-hand combat was the order of the day. Gunpowder was developed by the Chinese almost 1,000 years later in AD 919. Cannons were first used in the Hundred Years' War at the Battle of Crecy in AD 1346, and airplanes appeared near the turn of the century, 1903. Long-range rocket-powered missiles came in 1940 and the atomic bomb soon after. The world will never forget the devastating destruction wrought on Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the cargoes of the Enola Gay and another B-29 bomber. In the 20th century, knowledge has increased at an alarming rate. Man has now developed the capability of totally destroying himself. What a precarious position for humanity. Yet, man did destroy himself once before. Man was apparently on the same course of self-destruction just before the Great Flood, some 2,000 years before Christ lived on this earth. God could not bear to watch this wanton destruction of his newly created planet. He had already had to watch the ravages of sin upon the Garden of Eden, and the beloved of his creations turn against him. He vowed not to allow humanity to destroy itself. God blew the whistle on millions of human beings before the human race became extinct. It took several hundred years to build the ark, but only 8 human beings believed God and were saved in it. Will God again blow the whistle on his beloved human race, or will he let things ride along status quo? Will he allow man to destroy himself for good this time? In each of these scenarios, God had everything at stake. He felt it imperative that he prove to all the universe that he should be the ruler of the universe and that his ways are true and just. At the time of the great deluge, he had not had the opportunity to prove that fact. He had created another beautiful world and provided the inhabitants with everything they could possibly want. But to a man, they rejected their God, their Creator, and the one responsible for the power that keeps every electron spinning around every nucleus of every atom. Without God, there is no life, there is no motion, there is nothing. God will prove his omnipotence and thus disprove the great lie of the theory of evolution. This theory purports that something can come from nothing. God will once again prove that everything comes from him and nothing exists without him. We cannot begin to imagine that kind of power, but John spent 22 chapters explaining how every living creature will understand it completely. Man rejected God, his love, and his truth. Even in the courts of God's home, heaven, there were questions. If God's methods were right, why did these upstart human beings, far inferior to angels, reject their Creator? The champion of these views was Lucifer, God's most magnificent angel. He was determined to prove God wrong and take control of the universe himself. What even he failed to grasp was that without God there is nothing. He, Lucifer, would cease to exist. Arguably the most intelligent being ever created by God could not comprehend the power of his almighty Creator. It truly is the mystery of the universe, but how thankful we must be that our all-powerful Creator loved us enough to forgive our doubt and rescue us from the clutches of sin and eternal death. How any rational human being can turn down an offer like that is beyond all reason. The earthly equivalent might be the bankrupt man winning the lottery and then turning it down. But this is just what is happening as I write this book. People are turning down everything for a chance at nothing. Mindless suicide. But God was determined to prove his methods to be right, and that he alone was, or ever could be, the ruler of the universe. God was, however, in a very difficult position. He could not force these humans to accept him or his premise, no matter how correct it was. Everyone had to voluntarily confess that God truly is the one true God, the more than deserved ruler of all life, and that he is love. God's only choice was to sacrifice his Son to prove beyond any reasonable or unreasonable doubt that he alone is the King of Kings. John was an eyewitness to this proof before the fact. Although he may not have realized it at the time, this privilege must have been one of the highlights of his life. In our short lives, all of us have had highlights. Maybe a graduation, marriage, birth of a child. Maybe he was witnessing a World Series home run or a virtuoso concert performance. But these special moments all pale in comparison to being there, not only when Jesus was crucified, but when he was resurrected. It was at this unprecedented event that our fate was decided for all eternity by the wondrous love of God. Will God let man destroy himself? John says God will again intervene, but this time he will utilize a new instrument of destruction. The first time it was water, but this time it will be fire. Fortunately for humanity, not 8, but many millions will be saved. I often speculate as to whether Noah would have made the same choice as Adam did, or if he could have said no to the wily serpent. I would like to think so, but I expect not. Noah had to give up his friends and the beautiful environment of the antediluvians, but Adam would have had to give up his most precious and beloved wife. Adam could not perceive this as a temporary situation and followed Eve down the path of the old serpent. With the burden of proof now shifted to God, John now proceeds to describe God's successful defense of his premise. He alone is the true God, there is no other. Therefore, let us proceed to examine the court records in the form of John's humble yet powerful book. Our interpretation will be non-private, that is, it will be open for all to see. God asked Daniel to seal up his book until the time of the end. However, in Revelation 22:10, God says to John, "Seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand." A simple review should give us the answers needed to correctly interpret John's book. Revelation 1:3 reiterates the phrase, "The time is at hand." Let us forge ahead into our future.